Hey, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. We are now just a couple days out from the 2025 Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, and we did get a lot more updates today. I had a feeling yesterday when I made my video, because there were so few updates out there this week, that we would get a lot in these next couple of days, and that turned out to be true. We got a bunch of updates today from a bunch of the top guys. I want to start out with this video of Shaun Clarida, courtesy of Rep 1. Now, this video is significant because we had gotten a good amount of updates from Shaun over the last few weeks, but not really showing his legs. And as you guys know, at the Olympia, that was kind of a big point of criticism. There was an imbalance from his left to right leg. One was noticeably smaller than the other. And I feel like in this video where he shows his legs, that imbalance is less noticeable than it was at the Olympia, which is a good sign. But I do think it's still slightly noticeable, but not quite as much as it was at the Olympia. And obviously, for a number of reasons, this will be a much different version of Shaun than we saw at the Olympia. For one, this is not 212. So he's playing a little bit of a different game, even though in 212 he was way under the weight limit anyway. This is Shaun competing in open. So I think we're going to see a bigger, fuller version of Shaun. And then on top of that, for the Olympia, he was still working with Matt Jansen. For this show, he's working with Stefan, boss of Outlaw, where we saw him have pretty good results when he competed against Chris Bumstead and Martin Fitzwater at the Prague Pro shortly after the Olympia. Personally, I think that everything we've seen so far from Shaun and Stefan working together suggests that it's a really good combination, and it's working for Shaun's physique. I think he looks great here. Like I said about Prague, I thought he looked better there than he looked at the Olympia. And if, again, you look back, the last time that Shaun did the Open Arnold Classic, 2023, which was also a year that Samson Dauda competed and won, you had Samson Dauda in first, Nick Walker in second, Andrew Jack in third, Big Ramy in fourth. Now, that's a hell of a lineup, but Shaun Clarida was in the top 5 there. I think he's going to be in the top 5 here again at this year's Arnold Classic. Because even though this year is an amazing lineup as well, you've got two really good names that Shaun competed against, Big Ramy and Nick Walker, that are not in it this year. But then again, this year you do have Derek Lunsford and Brandon Curry, who did not compete in it the year that Shaun Clarida did. So I still think Shaun Clarida will be able to take a top 5 placing here. I think he's kind of the wild card here, or maybe the dark horse is a better word. Shaun Clarida looks incredible. I think my favorite comparison, or my favorite nickname, or whatever you want to call it for Shaun Clarida, is when I see people say he's like a miniature Ronnie Coleman. I think that is such an apt observation about Shaun's physique. Yes, he's a very, very short bodybuilder, but on his frame, he's packed on literally as much muscle everywhere on his physique as his physique could probably possibly hold. And then he brings that ton of muscle in really good condition. And he's got a little bit of a freak factor to him as well, even though he's so small in stature. And in that regard, he is like a miniature version of Ronnie Coleman. And you really got to think about how stacked this Arnold Classic lineup is. You've got 4 Mr. Olympias in here. Samson Dauda, Derek Lunsford, Brandon Curry, and Shaun Clarida, a 212 Mr. Olympia. And that brings me to the next physique update. We also got an update from Brandon Curry, which he says was taken yesterday. And we haven't seen as many updates from Brandon. We saw a couple posing videos here and there further out from the show. But these updates, Brandon looks really good. He looks really full, really vascular. A lot of people noticed that in that posing video that he had posted earlier on in the Arnold prep, that he looked a little bit downsized. He looked a little bit smaller. And I even heard, he was on a podcast, I forget which one it was now, but he was talking about even potentially doing the Masters Olympia this year before the Olympia. Because, again, Brandon is 41 years old, and it is worth pointing out that at the Olympia this past year in 2024, Brandon took 9th. So there's several guys in this lineup, including William Bonac, including Andrew Jack, Samson Dauda, Derek Lunsford, that all placed ahead of Brandon at the last Olympia. And the question is, was that a fluke or not? Did something just go wrong with Brandon there, and he's going to look back to his old self here and find himself in a top spot? Because for the past like half a decade, Brandon has been in one of the top spots at the Olympia, top 4, top 3, top 2, or winning. And in the past half a decade as well, when he did the Arnold, 2019, 2022, he won twice in half a decade. So we're not used to seeing Brandon in a position like ninth going into a show like the Arnold. So is Brandon somebody that's being counted out because of that placing that could still very well be in the conversation? Because for such a long time, Brandon has not been out of the conversation in really any show that he's done, even the Olympia. So my question to you guys is, do you think that could have been just a fluke that he placed ninth at the Olympia this year? Because honestly, I was looking over Brandon Curry's entire career, his contest history, and this year's Olympia placing in 2024 was his lowest Olympia placing in a decade. Prior to that, it was 16th, but through most of his career, he was within the top 10 at the Olympia, and then, more, like I said, more recently, we're talking about top 2, top 3, or even winning. And even at last year's Olympia, well, 2023's Olympia, the year before this past Olympia, he was in the hospital like the day before and still managed to pull out a top 4 placing at that Olympia. So I kind of wonder if Brandon is a guy that we shouldn't be counting out of this Arnold, and maybe he's a bit of a wild card too, but I kind of see it being, I think the top 3 in no particular order will include Samson, Derek, and Andrew Jacked. Now I think 4 and 5, I really feel like that could be Shaun, Brandon, Bonac fighting for those spots. But he does look good in these updates. It's just kind of an interesting thing to speculate about when it comes to Brandon's potential performance at the Arnold this year, because it's just been so long since we've had a conversation about Brandon Curry where he was not either the favorite or like almost a lock-in to be top 3. In years, we haven't talked about Brandon in this way. But that brings me to the latest physique update from one of the guys that I just mentioned. William Bonac just posted a physique update today. Now, he doesn't specify in this update when it was taken. He actually invites fans to guess at what point in his prep that physique update was taken. But William Bonac and Brandon Curry were somewhat rivals throughout a lot of their career, especially at the Arnold Classic. And most recently, at the 2024 Olympia, he was 2 placings ahead of Brandon in 7th place, making him the 3rd highest Olympia placer that's competing in this lineup. Of course, the 3 highest being Samson, Derek, and Andrew Jacked. And then in between them, you also had Martin Fitzwater, who's not doing the show, Hadi Chupin, who was 2nd, who's obviously not doing the show, and Hunter Labrada, who was 6th, which makes William Bonac the 4th highest Olympia placer, and with the Olympia being the biggest show in bodybuilding and just having been, really a matter of months ago at this point, it really does put Bonac in a very favorable position on paper in this lineup to do very well. And on top of that Olympia placing, he's also a former Arnold Classic champion, which there are several of in this lineup, as well as several Mr. Olympias, which makes this such a dynamic show. Now, another guy that I want to talk about that I think has a chance, depending on how his conditioning looks here, is Carlos Thomas Jr., who we finally got another physique update from, courtesy of his coach, Patrick Torr. And again, a lot of these updates, like I said, are taken at that Pro Fitness gym in Columbus, Ohio, because the lighting in that posing room is so good. So the setting of so many of these physique updates is going to be the same, because that is kind of the gym to go to for these guys when they get to Columbus. But Carlos Thomas Jr., this guy has a phenomenal physique, freaky body parts, crazy 3D, giant legs, tiny waist, crazy arms. He has a lot going for him. I think the thing that we're really looking for from Carlos this year, for him to get one of the top placings, let's say top 6 or better, is to really improve the detail, the conditioning with his physique, and also the back. Now, we saw a glimpse of his back, but we still haven't really seen a full comprehensive update of what his back is looking like. And I look at this update, the front double bicep, which I think is just an insane shot for him. He looks great in this pose. Nice X frame, really small waist, big arms, big legs, good taper. And he looks conditioned. You can see separation in his legs, cross striations in his quads. His midsection looks small. And granted, one of the reasons why we didn't see him compete a lot last year was the gastrointestinal issues that he had. I still look at this update, and I still kind of wonder how sharp he's going to be at this show. there's still something about his physique in this update that doesn't scream peeled or dry. And that's why I want to see his back, not just his upper back, the glutes and the hamstrings too, to get a better idea of what kind of shape Carlos is in right now, because it's hard to tell in just this pose, which I think shows off his strong points the best. But this is not a pose where you can see like him flexing his serratus or his obliques. This is not a pose where he's flexing his chest and you can see the cross striations. It's not a pose where you can see if his glutes are striated, how deep are his hamstrings. All you can really see is him flexing his quads. He's got some cross striations going. You can see how crazy his taper is, and you can see how big his arms are. But I don't think this is the best pose to judge what kind of condition he's in at just a couple days out from the show. And it still kind of makes me wonder why we haven't seen more than shots like this. Typically, a lot of the updates that we saw from Carlos were this shot or a most muscular all throughout this prep, because obviously this is a really good shot for him. But let me know in the comments below, based on all these crazy updates that you've seen in this video so far, what's your top 5 looking like? What's your top 3 looking like? Have any of these updates changed your predictions at all? And before I pivot over into talking about some of the classic physique updates we got, I wanted to just put up a side-by-side comparison of both Derek Lunsford and Samson Dauda, both hitting a side chest. Now, this is not a straight one-to-one comparison. Samson's update was a little bit more recent than Derek's. Samson's was about 2 weeks out, and Derek's was about 4. And I wanted to show this because we haven't gotten really any recent updates from either of these two guys yet this week. But I think obviously most people are talking about this being Samson's show to lose. I think Samson is by far the favorite to win this thing. And then if anybody is challenging Samson the most or has the best shot at beating Samson, it's the most recent other Mr. Olympia in this lineup, Derek Lunsford. So while we haven't got any super recent updates this week, I just wanted to compare this side shot because obviously what we know about Samson versus Derek, and Derek in particular, is Derek's shots are very strong from the back. I think that's the most likely poses that he would beat Samson if he beats him in any. But I wanted to take kind of an opportunity to show off what I think is one of Samson's really strong points. I think he's really strong in the side poses. I think he's got one of the biggest, fullest chests, especially in those side poses, in the top grouping of guys right now. But then I think the really impressive part of this update, which we talked about 2 weeks ago when we talked about it, was comparing this to the Olympia. And just look at the way the hamstring hangs on his leg. Look at just the thickness in his profile from the side. Upper body, round, full, 3D, crazy. But look at just how much depth there is to his leg from the side. It's insane. And maybe the angle is a little bit different between this and the angle of Derek. But I think this is just one cherry-picked pose that I wanted to showcase because it was a recent update from both guys. And I think obviously, like I said, we've talked a lot about Derek's strong point. Derek's strong point is the two back poses, the back double and the back lat spread. I think more so the back double over the back lat spread. But that and maybe the abs and thighs. But we know that Samson has brought up his back. It looks like he's brought up his legs, even from the Olympia. I think this is going to be a good battle, and I think you kind of have to think about, well, why did Derek lose the Olympia in 2024, and why did Samson win? I think just in simple terms, it comes down to Derek was slightly off from where he was in 2023 when he won, and Samson was better, and that gap led to those placings changing. So the question that I would say we have to ask ourselves going into the Arnold is, will Derek be better enough to beat Samson this time around from how he looked at the Olympia? Because I think based on Samson's updates, and it seems like a lot of people would agree with this, that Samson is almost definitely going to look even better than he looked at the Olympia. And that look at the Olympia was good enough to beat an off version of Derek. Now, I don't think Derek looked bad at the Olympia, just not as good as 2023. But I think Derek is really going to have some distance to close if he wants to be that much better than the Olympia to beat an even better Samson here. And what I've heard is that Derek, and we've kind of surmised this by looking at his physique updates, what I've heard is that that is the game plan, is that Derek is trying to come in bigger and heavier for this show. Like a 5-pound heavier stage weight is the rumor going around of what they're shooting for. And I think we've seen that in a lot of the updates that he's posted. Some of them he hasn't looked as peeled as he typically does at those points in his prep, but he looked a lot bigger and fuller. And the question is, will that prove to be a good strategy or not going into the Arnold, when I think the main reason that he didn't do well at the Olympia, or as well as he had obviously hoped, was that he was a little bit off conditioning-wise and maybe a little bit flat. So by trying to add size here, is that going to be a good thing for him to do if he's trying to overcome the Olympia look, which I think fell short conditioning-wise? It also, fullness too, but I think even with the chip on his shoulder, Derek is going to have a tough road ahead of him trying to beat Samson at this show. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Derek or Samson, or maybe even Andrew Jacked for the winner, or maybe somebody else. Just give me your top 5. Whoever it is winning, whatever. Let me know in the comments below. Now let's talk about Classic Physique for a second. Switching back to Patrick Torr, the coach of Carlos Thomas Jr., who we just talked about earlier, also coaching Logan Franklin. Logan Franklin has been much talked about in recent weeks going into this show, looking to also look much improved from the Olympia. Actually, I think he looks fantastic, maybe his best look that I've ever seen in some of his physique updates. And I think Logan might be another guy, or one of the guys, that we could throw his Olympia placing maybe out the window. He was outside of the top 10 at the Olympia, but this does not look like the Olympia version of Logan. This looks much better than that. So I think the Olympia placing could go out the window. If you're going on Olympia placings, I would say your top 3 in Classic Physique on paper should include Wesley, Mike Sommerfeld, and Michael Boul. They were the 3 highest Olympia placers. And then maybe your wild card guy for taking one of those spots would be Matt Grego. But if you throw the Olympia out the window, I think Logan also has a chance at being the wild card guy for maybe cracking the top 3, or at least being in the top 5, even though he wasn't one of the 3 highest Olympia placers. Because, like I said, to me, this looks like a different Logan. And that brings me to the final story of today's video. Another physique update also shot in the pros gym from Michael Boul, as I mentioned, the 3rd highest Olympia placer in this lineup. On paper, he should be right there in the mix with Wesley Vissers and Mike Sommerfeld. And actually, I shouldn't even say 3rd highest Olympia placer, because he placed ahead of Wesley Vissers. So I'm kind of thinking of Wesley in the top 3 ahead of him, but he was actually ahead of Wesley, so it would be him and Mike. That would be actually the 2 highest Olympia placers in this lineup. And very similar to the point that I made in yesterday's video, talking about Mike Sommerfeld and the importance of this Arnold Classic when it comes to the future of Classic Physique, because now in the absence of Chris Bumstead, this is where they're going to start deciding what the standard is going forward. And when you talk about all these top guys that we're talking about, whether it's Wesley Vissers, Mike Sommerfeld, Michael Boul, Logan Franklin, who's the other? Matt Grego. They all have very different physiques, and especially if you talk about Wesley, Mike, and Michael Boul. Michael Boul is kind of a guy that I think brings a very conditioned look to Classic Physique. I feel like that's kind of become what he's known for. He's not the biggest, not the most muscular guy, and not even like the craziest aesthetics to him. Whereas Mike Sommerfeld, like we talked about yesterday, he's kind of a very muscular, kind of compact, almost a 212 look for a classic guy, but he's got a great taper, and he's got great classic lines. And then Wesley Vissers is like this tall, very aesthetic, very big, lots of stage presence, very imposing classic guy. Logan Franklin, who's another tall guy, but very streamlined, great posing. So this Arnold is going to be significant, I think, because you've got so many in this conversation for the win, different looking physiques, very apples and oranges. And you don't have Ramon Dino, you don't have Urs Kalsinski, you don't have Breon Ainsley, you don't have Chris Bumstead, you don't have Terrence Ruffin. So I think this is a show that's going to kind of set the tone, where the judges have an opportunity here to say, this is kind of what we're looking for in this new era post Chris Bumstead. Is it going to be a big, tall, imposing guy like Wesley? Is it going to be a more muscular guy like Mike Sommerfeld? Is it going to be a more streamlined guy like Logan Franklin with immaculate posing? Is it going to be very condition-oriented with a guy like Michael Boul? These are kind of the things that I'm thinking about as we anticipate this classic physique lineup. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We're getting very, very close to the show. Top 5 for men's open, top 5 for classic physique. Let me know your predictions in the comments down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already, all that good stuff. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. I'll see you in Columbus. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.